He was 16 when his stepfather threw him and his brother out of the only home they'd ever known. What they found in the woods didn't just save their lives, it taught them what family really meant. If you've ever felt lost and wondered if there's a safe place for you somewhere in this world, hit that subscribe button, because this story is for you. The front door clicked shut behind us with a sound so final, it seemed to cut a line through my life. Everything before and everything after. It was November in the Pacific Northwest, the kind of cold that doesn't just bite, it gnaws. A wet, insistent chill that found its way through the thin fabric of my hoodie and settled deep in my bones. My brother Sam stood beside me on the cracked concrete porch, his face pale in the dying light of the afternoon. He was 12, all sharp angles and oversized glasses, clutching the strap of his school backpack like it was a life raft. It was. It held his asthma inhaler, a half-eaten bag of chips, and a worn copy of a book about dragons. Everything he owned in the world. My own backpack felt heavier. It contained 2 changes of clothes, my phone with its cracked screen and 17% battery, the $84 I'd saved from bagging groceries, and a crushing weight of failure. My stepfather, a man named Rick who smelled of sawdust and stale beer, had been yelling for an hour. The words themselves were a blur of familiar accusations: lazy, ungrateful, a bad influence. The final straw had been a broken dish, a cheap, ugly plate from a set he'd bought at a garage sale. It slipped from my soapy hands, and the sound of it shattering on the linoleum floor was like a starting gun. "Get out!" he'd roared, his face turning a blotchy, dangerous red. "Both of you. I'm done feeding another man's kids." My mother stood by the counter, her hands twisting a dish towel, her eyes fixed on a spot on the wall just over my shoulder. She didn't say a word, not when he grabbed our backpacks from our room and threw them onto the porch, not when he pushed me toward the door, not even when Sam started to cry, a silent, hiccuping sob that tore at my insides. Her silence was louder than his shouting. It was the sound of abandonment. The click of the lock was just an echo. We stood there for a long time, the cold seeping into our shoes. The sky was the color of a bruise. Lights were coming on in the windows of the other houses on our drab suburban street, yellow squares of warmth and safety that felt a million miles away. "Leo?" Sam's voice was small, a puff of white in the frigid air. "Where are we going to go?" I looked down at him, at his thin frame shivering inside a jacket that was already too small for him. Fear was a physical thing, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. I was 16. I was supposed to have answers. I was supposed to protect him. And I had nothing. "I don't know yet," I said, forcing a confidence I didn't feel. "But we'll figure it out. We always do, right?" He nodded, but his eyes were wide and scared. We didn't always figure it out. We just survived from one bad situation to the next. Our real dad had left when Sam was a baby, a ghost we only knew from a single faded photograph. Our mom tried, I guess, but she had a talent for picking men who broke things, promises, furniture, spirits. Rick was just the latest in a long line. I scanned the street. We couldn't stay here. A neighbor might call the cops, and the cops would call social services. I'd heard stories about the system, about brothers being separated. That was the one thing I couldn't let happen. Sam was the only thing that mattered. He was the only real family I had left. "We need to walk," I said, my mind racing. "We need to get away from here before someone sees us." We started walking, with no destination in mind, just away. Away from the slammed door, the silent mother, the broken plate. Each step felt heavy, unreal. The neighborhood faded behind us, replaced by the commercial strip on the edge of town. Gas stations, fast food joints, a laundromat. The world kept moving, cars rushing past with people heading home to their warm houses and their evening meals, oblivious to the two boys walking on the gravel shoulder, ghosts in their own lives. My phone buzzed, a text from my mom. My heart leaped with a stupid, desperate hope. Maybe she'd stood up to him. Maybe she was telling us to come back. I pulled it out, my fingers clumsy with cold. The message was short. "I'm so sorry. He's just angry. Find somewhere safe for tonight. I'll call you tomorrow when he's cooled down. I love you. Love." The word felt like a stone in my gut. Love wasn't a text message. Love wasn't letting your children walk out into the freezing cold with nowhere to go. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. I didn't reply. What was there to say? My battery was at 15%. I turned the phone off to save it. "Was that Mom?" Sam asked, his voice hopeful. "Yeah," I said, shoving the phone back in my pocket. She said she's working on it. It was a lie, but it was a kind lie. And right now, kindness was a currency we were short on. We kept walking. The $84 in my pocket felt impossibly small. It could get us a motel room for one night, maybe. But what about the night after that? And the night after that? It was a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. We needed a plan. We needed a place. My mind started sifting through the wreckage of my childhood, looking for anything that could help us. And then a memory surfaced, faint and dusty. A story my grandfather used to tell me, back when I was very young, before he and my mom had their big falling out, and he disappeared from our lives. He was a strange man, my grandpa. He'd fought in a war somewhere far away, and came back quiet and watchful. He used to take me for walks in the state forest that bordered the back of our old rental house, the one we lived in before Rick. He'd talk about survival, about being prepared. He called the woods the great equalizer. He'd point out edible plants, show me how to find north using the sun, and he'd tell me stories about building things. He was always building. He once told me, his voice a low rumble, "Every man needs a bolt hole, Leo. A place to go when the world gets too loud." I was 5. I didn't know what a bolt hole was. I just nodded along. The state forest. It was miles away, a huge, sprawling wilderness of Douglas fir and tangled undergrowth. People went there to hike and camp in the summer, but in November, it would be empty. Cold, but empty. Hidden. It wasn't a home, but it was a place to disappear. "I have an idea," I said to Sam, trying to sound like I knew what I was doing. "Remember Grandpa Joe?" Sam shook his head. He'd been too little to remember him. "Well, he used to talk about the woods, the big forest up past North Creek. He said there were places there you could be safe." "Like a cabin?" Sam's eyes lit up a little. "Something like that," I hedged. I had no idea what I was looking for. A cave? An abandoned hunter's shack? Anything. "It's a long walk, though. You think you can make it?" He straightened his shoulders, a miniature soldier getting ready for a march. "I can make it." So we walked. We bought 2 hot dogs and a bottle of water from a gas station, a purchase that felt extravagant and terrifying at the same time. $10 gone, just like that. We ate them on a cold metal bench, huddled together for warmth. The salty, processed meat tasting like the best meal I'd ever had. Then we started walking again, toward the dark line of trees on the horizon. The journey into the forest was harder than I'd imagined. The sun set completely, plunging the world into a deep, velvety darkness broken only by a sliver of moon. The temperature dropped further. We left the last of the streetlights behind, and the woods swallowed us whole. The air grew still and smelled of damp earth and pine needles. Every snap of a twig sounded like a predator. Every gust of wind through the high branches sounded like a whisper. Sam stumbled, and I grabbed his arm. "You okay?" "I'm just cold, Leo." "I know, me too. We just have to keep moving. Moving keeps you warm." It was another line I'd probably heard in a movie, but it sounded true enough. We followed an old, overgrown logging road, our feet sinking into the muddy ruts. We'd been walking for hours. My legs ached. Sam was starting to lag, his breathing growing a little ragged. I stopped and listened. His puffs of breath were coming out in short, sharp bursts. "Sam, you need your inhaler?" He shook his head, too proud to admit it. "I'm okay." "Don't be stupid. Use it." He fumbled in his backpack and took a puff. The small hiss of the device was a fragile, mechanical sound in the vast, organic silence of the woods. We were so small, so unprepared. The weight of my responsibility pressed down on me. I had brought my asthmatic little brother into the freezing wilderness based on the rambling memories of a man I hadn't seen in a decade. This wasn't a plan, it was a prayer. We pushed on for another hour, deeper into the forest. The logging road petered out, and we were just pushing through ferns and underbrush. We were lost. I wouldn't admit it to Sam, but I knew it. The hope that had been a tiny flicker in my chest was sputtering out, leaving a cold ash of despair. We were going to freeze out here. "Leo, I can't," Sam whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm too tired." He was right. We had to stop. We needed shelter, a fire, something. I scanned the darkness, my eyes searching for anything, an overhang of rock, a hollow log. And then I saw it. It wasn't much, just a shape, a slightly unnatural-looking mound of earth and moss not far off the path, nestled between the roots of a colossal old-growth fir tree. It looked wrong. The slope was too uniform. "Wait here," I told Sam, propping him up against a tree. I pushed my way through the slick, wet ferns toward the mound. It was about 4 feet high and maybe 10 feet across. As I got closer, I saw what had caught my eye, a glint of metal. I knelt down, my heart starting to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I clawed away at the thick carpet of moss and damp soil. My fingers brushed against cold, rusted steel. It was a handle, a heavy, recessed T-bar handle set into a thick metal plate. I pulled at it, grunting with the effort. It didn't budge. I dug around the edges of the plate, my bare hands scraping against rock and dirt. I uncovered the outline of a square, a hatch. It was a hatch, set flush with the ground, camouflaged by decades of forest growth. A bolt hole. The words echoed in my head, my grandfather's voice a low rumble from the past. "Every man needs a bolt hole." "Sam!" I yelled, my voice cracking with a wild surge of adrenaline and disbelief. "Sam, get over here! I found something!" He trudged over, his curiosity overriding his exhaustion. We both stared at the discovery. It looked like something out of a spy movie, a forgotten relic of the Cold War. Together we put our hands on the handle and pulled. We strained, our muscles screaming, our feet slipping in the mud. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep, groaning screech of rusted metal, the hatch moved. It lifted an inch. We pulled again, harder, putting all our weight into it. The hatch opened, swinging upwards on a thick, protesting hinge. It revealed a dark, square opening and a steep metal ladder descending into blackness. A gust of air rose to meet us. It was stale, but it wasn't cold. It was shockingly, blessedly not cold. It smelled of dust and concrete and time. "What is it?" Sam whispered, peering into the abyss. "I don't know," I breathed, a strange mix of terror and elation flooding my system. "But I think it's what we've been looking for." I took a deep breath, turned on my phone's flashlight, and pointed it down into the darkness. The beam cut through the black, illuminating the rungs of the ladder and a concrete floor about 15 feet below. It looked like a tomb, but it was shelter. "Stay here," I told Sam. "I'm going down first." "No," he said, his voice firm. "We go together." I looked at his determined face and nodded. He was right. Together. I slung my backpack over my shoulder, held the phone in my mouth to light the way, and started down the ladder. The rungs were cold and gritty under my hands. Sam followed close behind me, his sneakers scraping against the metal. When my feet touched the solid concrete floor, I swept the flashlight beam around the space. We were in a small, square room, maybe 12 by 12. The walls were thick, poured concrete, sweating with condensation. Against one wall was a heavy steel door, the kind you'd see on a bank vault, with a large wheel in the center. It was a bunker, a real, honest-to-God bunker, buried in the middle of the forest. My grandfather, the quiet, watchful man who told me stories about being prepared, had actually done it. He had built his bolt hole. I turned the wheel on the door. It was stiff, but it moved. With a heavy clank, the locking bolts retracted. I pulled the massive door open, and we stepped inside. The air in here was even more still, perfectly preserved. I swept my light across the new room. It was larger, maybe 20 by 20, and it wasn't empty. Along one wall were metal shelves, stacked neatly with military-style ration cans, boxes of matches, first aid kits, and jugs of water. In the corner, a small generator sat silent, with several full cans of fuel next to it. There were 2 simple cots with neatly folded wool blankets and flat pillows. A small wood-burning stove stood against the far wall, a stack of split logs beside it. And on a small wooden desk in the corner sat an old oil lamp, a CB radio, and a single, thick, leather-bound book. A journal. We stood there in the center of the room, 2 boys cast out from the world, and stared at our impossible salvation. The silence was absolute. It was the sound of safety, the sound of a future we didn't think we had an hour ago. Sam let out a long, shuddering breath, and his backpack slid from his shoulder, thudding onto the floor. "Leo," he said, his voice filled with awe. "We're home." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I walked over to the cots and touched one of the wool blankets. It was rough and clean. This wasn't just a shelter, it was a place that had been prepared, a place that was waiting. For us. I ran my fingers over the dusty cover of the journal on the desk. It felt like I was touching a ghost. The first thing we did was get the light on. I found the oil lamp on the desk, and thankfully, it was full. My hands shook as I fumbled with the box of matches, but on the third try, the wick caught, and a warm, golden light filled the bunker. It pushed the deep, oppressive darkness into the corners and made the space feel less like a tomb and more like a room. The flickering light danced across Sam's face, and for the first time since the front door had clicked shut, I saw the fear in his eyes recede, replaced by a look of wonder. We explored every inch of our new world. The shelves were a treasure trove. Canned beans, stew, powdered milk, coffee, hard candy. Dozens of gallons of water in sealed containers. It wasn't just food for a few days. It was food for months. There was a chemical toilet in a small, partitioned-off corner, complete with instructions. There were tools, a hand crank radio, batteries of every size, warm socks, and heavy-duty work gloves. My grandfather hadn't just built a shelter, he'd stocked an ark. He had anticipated every need with a methodical precision that was both comforting and a little terrifying. Who was this man who had prepared for the end of the world with such quiet competence? He thought of everything, Sam murmured, running his hand over a can of peaches. Looks like it, I said. My mind was still reeling, trying to process the sheer improbability of it all. We were safe. We were warm. We had food. The knot of fear that had been clenched in my gut since we'd left the house began to slowly, tentatively, unwind. Our first meal in the bunker was a can of cold beef stew, shared between us, eaten with a single spoon we found in a mess kit. We sat on the floor, our backs against the cold concrete wall, the lamplight casting long, dancing shadows. It was the most delicious thing I had ever tasted. We were too tired and overwhelmed to even try starting the wood stove. We just unrolled the wool blankets on the cots. They were scratchy and smelled faintly of cedar and mothballs. I pulled mine up to my chin and watched Sam on the other cot. His breathing was already deep and even. He was asleep in minutes, secure for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. I, however, couldn't sleep. I lay there in the profound silence, the only sound the gentle hiss of the oil lamp. The reality of our situation began to sink in. We had found this place, this miracle in the ground, but it was a temporary solution. What was our next move? How long could we stay here? The world outside was still there. Our mother, Rick. The school we were supposed to be attending. The entire system we had just fallen out of. We were two missing kids. Sooner or later, someone would come looking. Or worse, no one would. I got up and walked over to the desk. The leather journal beckoned. It felt like the key to everything, the answer to the questions swirling in my head. Why did he build this? Why did he leave our lives? Who was he, really? My hand trembled slightly as I opened it to the first page. The handwriting was neat, precise, and angular, written in black ink. The first entry was dated almost 20 years ago. June 12th. The concrete is poured. The main chamber is sound. It feels good to build something with my own hands that is meant to last. Something that can withstand a storm. I hope she never needs it. But hope is not a plan. A man needs a plan. She. He meant my mother. I flipped through the pages. It wasn't a daily diary. It was a logbook of the bunker's construction, mixed with observations, memories, and reflections. He wrote about mixing the concrete, installing the air filtration system, hauling the supplies out here piece by piece in his old truck over the course of 2 years, telling everyone he was just going on camping trips. He documented every can of food, every box of matches. It was the work of a man obsessed. But obsessed with what? I kept reading, page after page, my story unfolding through his. He wrote about my mother, his daughter, with a fierce, aching love. He wrote about his pride when she graduated high school, his worry when she started dating my father. He didn't like my father. He called him a man with a storm behind his eyes. August 4th. He hit her today. She tried to hide it, but I saw the bruise on her arm. She made excuses for him, said it was a one-time thing, that he was under a lot of stress. There is no excuse. A man who hits a woman once will do it again. She doesn't see the danger. She's blinded by what she thinks is love. I tried to talk to her, to get her to leave him. She called me controlling, said I was trying to run her life. Maybe I am, but I'd rather be a controlling father than a grieving one. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in the bunker. I never knew my real father. My mom always said he just left, that he couldn't handle the responsibility of a family. But this was a different story, a darker one. I read on, my heart pounding. The entries became more frantic. May 21st. Leo was born today. I held him in my arms, and I have never felt a love so pure or a fear so profound. He is so small, so fragile. And his father looked at him, not with joy, but with something I can only describe as resentment. Like the boy was an anchor, tying him down. I saw him, when he thought no one was looking, grip my daughter's arm too tight. The storm behind his eyes is growing. The work on the shelter must go faster. He was building this place for us, to protect us from my own father. The narrative my mother had constructed of my childhood, a simple story of abandonment, crumbled into dust. It was replaced by something far more sinister. The journal continued through the first few years of my life. Little anecdotes about me, things I'd said or done. He wrote about taking me for walks in these same woods, teaching me about the trees. The memories were vague in my mind, like faded photographs, but his words brought them into sharp focus. I remembered his rough, calloused hand holding mine. I remembered the low rumble of his voice. And then, the final entries, the ones that explained everything. October 17th. He put her in the hospital. A fall down the stairs, she said. The doctors knew. I knew. I went to the house to get her, to bring her and the boys here. He was there. We had words. It went further than words. I did what I had to do to protect my family. He won't be coming back. He won't be hurting them ever again. My breath hitched. What did that mean? He won't be coming back? The ambiguity was terrifying. October 19th. She knows what happened. She saw it, and she is terrified. Not of him, but of me. She looks at me like I'm a monster. Maybe I am. But sometimes, to fight a monster, you have to become one. She has made me promise to disappear. She wants to erase it all, to pretend none of it ever happened, for the sake of the boys. She is making a choice, a terrible, impossible choice. She is choosing a clean lie over a messy truth. She is choosing to protect her children from a violent father by erasing the grandfather who stopped him. October 20th. This is my last entry. I am leaving today. I will send her money when I can, from places she can't trace. I will watch from a distance. And I will leave this place, this bolt hole, as my final testament. The deed to this small parcel of land is in the lockbox, along with some cash to get started. The key is in the spine of this journal. If my grandchildren ever need this place, I pray they find it. I pray it keeps them safe. Leo, if you are reading this, know that I never stopped loving you. I never stopped watching over you. Everything I did for you. Be strong. Take care of your brother. You are the man of the house now. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. Tears were streaming down my face, hot trails on my cold skin. I cried for the grandfather I had been taught to resent, the man who had sacrificed everything for us. I cried for my mother, trapped in an impossible choice, who had spent her life running from a violent truth and building a fragile peace on a foundation of lies. And I cried for myself, for the boy who had believed those lies, who had felt abandoned by a man who had, in fact, been his fiercest protector. I reached for the journal again and felt along the inside of the thick leather spine. My fingers found a small lump. I carefully worked the fabric, and a small, flat metal key fell into my palm. I looked around the bunker. On the bottom shelf, tucked behind some boxes of water purification tablets, was a small, gray metal lockbox. It felt like I was disturbing a tomb, opening a chapter of my life that was supposed to stay buried forever. The key slid into the lock and turned with a quiet click. I lifted the lid. Inside, there was a folded, official-looking document, the deed, and stacks of cash. $100 bills, bundled in paper bands. I counted it slowly, my mind numb. There was $50,000, a fortune, a new beginning, bought at a terrible price. Underneath the money was a small, sealed envelope with my name, Leo, written on it in that same precise, angular script. My hands trembled as I tore it open. It was a letter. My dearest Leo, if you are reading this, it means the world has failed you in some way, and for that, I am truly sorry. I hoped you would never have to find this place. I hoped your mother would build a life for you and your brother that was safe and happy. But I was a soldier for a long time, and a soldier always prepares for the worst. There are things you need to know, truths your mother tried to shield you from. Your father was not a good man. He was violent and cruel, and his cruelty was escalating. The night I left, I gave your mother an ultimatum. Either she left him and came with me, or I would remove him from your lives permanently. She was too scared, too broken to leave, so I kept my promise. I made sure he could never hurt any of you again. I will not write down the details. Some things are a burden a man must carry alone. Let it be enough to say that I did what a father and a grandfather is supposed to do. I protected my family. The price of that protection was my exile. Your mother, in her fear and trauma, made me swear to disappear. She wanted you to have a normal life, untainted by that violence. She chose to tell you I abandoned you because she believed it was a kinder story than the truth. Perhaps she was right. But the truth has a way of surfacing. This money is yours. It is clean. It is the entirety of my military pension and savings. Use it to build a life. Buy a piece of land, get an education, take care of your brother. Don't let the ghosts of the past define your future. This bunker is yours now. The land is yours. It is not much, but it is a foundation. It is a place where no one can hurt you. Build on it. Be a better man than your father. Be a better man than me. Be good to your brother. He is your blood and your responsibility. I have watched you from afar over the years. I saw you learn to ride a bike. I saw you on your first day of school. I have always been there, a ghost in the trees, and I have always been proud of you. You have a good heart, Leo. Don't let the world harden it. Your loving grandfather, Joseph. I finished the letter, and the paper slipped from my fingers. I sat there on the cold concrete floor, the flickering lamplight making the shadows dance, and I felt the entire world shift on its axis. Every memory, every belief, every resentment I'd ever held was rearranged. My grandfather wasn't a villain who had abandoned us. He was a hero who had saved us. My mother wasn't just a weak woman who made bad choices. She was a victim of horrific abuse who had made an impossible choice to protect her sons from a truth she thought would destroy them. And Rick, my stepfather, he was nothing. Just a sad, angry man, a pale imitation of the real monster my grandfather had faced down. Sam stirred in his sleep, muttering something about dragons. I looked over at him, his face peaceful in the soft light. My grandfather's final words echoed in my head. "Take care of your brother. You are the man of the house now." For the first time, those words didn't feel like a burden. They felt like a mission, a legacy. We were no longer two lost boys hiding in a hole in the ground. We were the heirs to this kingdom of concrete and canned beans, the keepers of a secret history. We weren't just surviving anymore. We had a purpose. We had a home. And we had $50,000. Right now, I know there might be someone watching this who understands what it's like to have your world turned upside down, to find out that the story you've been told your whole life is a lie. It's a lonely, terrifying feeling. But I want you to know you're not alone. The people in this community, the ones who subscribe and share their stories in the comments, we get it. So if this is hitting you, if you've ever had to find your own truth, I want you to take a second and join us. Hit that like button and let me know you're here. Your story matters. Now, let's get back to what happened next, because finding the bunker, the money, and the truth, that wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of the real work. The next morning, I woke to a profound, disorienting silence. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then the smell of damp concrete and wool hit me, and it all came rushing back. The bunker, the journal, the money. I sat up on the cot. Sam was still asleep, a small lump under his blanket. The oil lamp had burned itself out, and the only light was a faint grayness filtering down the entrance shaft. It was dawn. A wave of grief washed over me, so intense it almost buckled my knees. It was a complex, layered grief. I was mourning the grandfather I never got to know, the years stolen from us by a necessary lie. I was mourning the mother I thought I had, and trying to understand the broken, terrified woman she must have been. And I was mourning my own lost innocence. I was 16, but I felt ancient. But grief is a luxury. We had work to do. My first priority was to make this place not just a shelter, but a home. A real home. A safe one. My grandfather had given us the shell. It was up to us to put a soul into it. I started with the basics. I found the instructions for the generator. They were, like everything else my grandfather did, simple and clear. I checked the fuel, checked the oil, and after a few sputtering attempts, the generator roared to life. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, a jarring intrusion of the mechanical into our silent sanctuary. But then I flipped a switch on a simple breaker box on the wall, and two bare bulbs strung from the ceiling flickered on. They cast a harsh, steady, beautiful light over everything. It was like the sun had risen underground. The noise was a problem. It would be audible from the surface, but the light and power felt like a miracle. We would only run it when we absolutely had to. The light woke Sam. He sat up, blinking in the sudden brightness. "Whoa," he breathed. "You did that?" "Grandpa did," I corrected him gently. "He left instructions." That day, we established a routine. I told Sam everything. I read him the journal, the letter. I showed him the money and the deed. He was only 12, but he had an old soul. He listened silently, his brow furrowed in concentration, his eyes wide behind his glasses. He didn't cry. He just seemed to absorb the immense, tragic weight of our family's history. When I was done, he was quiet for a long time. Then he looked at me and said, "So Grandpa was a good guy?" "Yeah, Sam," I said, my throat tight. "He was the best. And Mom lied to protect us. She did what she thought was right." He nodded slowly, processing it all. "Okay," he said finally, as if settling a great debate within himself. "So what do we do now?" It was the question I'd been asking myself all night. With $50,000, we could go anywhere. We could get an apartment in a new city, try to disappear. But the letter had been clear. This land, this bunker, was ours. It was the only thing anyone had ever given us that couldn't be taken away. Running felt like a betrayal of my grandfather's sacrifice. Staying felt like an act of defiance. "We stay," I said, the decision solidifying as I spoke the words. "We make this our place. We learn to live here. We get strong. And then, when we're ready, we'll face the world again. On our own terms." A slow grin spread across Sam's face. "Like secret agents?" "Yeah," I laughed. "Exactly. Like secret agents." So we became bunker dwellers. We spent the first week cleaning. We scrubbed the concrete floors, wiped down every can on the shelves, aired out the blankets. We fired up the small wood-burning stove, and for the first time, a real, radiating warmth filled the space, chasing away the deep, subterranean chill. We found a small grate on the wall that led to a clever ventilation shaft my grandfather had designed, which drew the smoke out through a hollowed-out log hundreds of feet away. The man was a genius. We learned the rhythms of the forest. We only left the bunker at dawn and dusk, when the light was low and the woods were quiet. We learned to move silently, to read the signs of the animals. The forest, which had been a terrifying enemy on our first night, slowly became our protector. It was our wall, our moat, our camouflage. Our biggest challenge was staying invisible. We couldn't just walk into town to buy supplies. We looked like what we were: two underage, unkempt kids on their own. That would bring questions we couldn't answer. We needed a strategy. I used some of the cash to buy an old, beat-up laptop and a mobile hotspot from an electronics store in a town 30 miles away, a place where no one would know us. The first thing I did was look up my grandfather, Joseph Miller. I found his military records. He was a decorated combat engineer. It made sense. He didn't just build things, he built things that lasted, things that could withstand a siege. I also found his obituary. He had died of a heart attack 2 years ago, alone in a small apartment on the other side of the state. He had kept his promise. He had stayed away. He had died a ghost. I wept again, but this time the tears were for him, for his lonely, honorable life. Using the laptop became our lifeline to the world. I started researching. I learned about homeschooling curriculums. Sam was smart, and he deserved an education. We used the canned food and supplies from the bunker, but we would eventually need more. I found online forums about off-grid living, homesteading, and survival. I learned about foraging, trapping, and how to purify water. My grandfather's library wasn't just the journal, it was the entire internet. We needed a contact, an ally in the outside world. This was the riskiest part. I thought about it for weeks. We couldn't trust anyone from our old life. Then I remembered Mr. Henderson, the old man who ran the dusty, cluttered hardware store in a small town called Pine Ridge, about an hour's drive away. I'd gone there with my grandfather once, years ago, to buy some bolts. Mr. Henderson was a veteran too. He and my grandfather had talked for an hour, a quiet, shorthand conversation between men who had seen things. He had a kind, craggy face and eyes that didn't miss much. He was a long shot, but he was the only one I could think of. I practiced what I would say 100 times. I took $5,000, dressed in the cleanest clothes we had, and drove the old pickup truck I'd found hidden under a tarp in a collapsed shed near the bunker. My grandfather had left the keys and the title signed over in the lockbox. It started up on the third try, another small miracle. Walking into that hardware store felt like walking onto a stage. The bell above the door jingled. Mr. Henderson looked up from behind the counter, his glasses perched on his nose. He didn't recognize me at first. "Can I help you, son?" "My name is Leo Miller," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Joseph Miller was my grandfather. His eyes sharpened. He looked at me, really looked at me, and a flicker of recognition crossed his face. "Joe's grandkid? I'll be damned. You've got his eyes. Haven't seen Joe in, must be 10 years. How is the old coot?" "He passed away, sir," I said quietly, 2 years ago." The old man's face fell. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "I'm sorry to hear that. He was a good man, a damn good man. What can I do for you, son?" I took a breath. "I'm in a bit of a jam, Mr. Henderson. My brother and we need some things, but we also need to be discreet." He held my gaze for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. He wasn't just looking at me, he was reading my whole story. He saw the fear, the desperation, the resolve. He saw the ghost of his old friend in my face. "Joe ever tell you about the time we were pinned down outside of Quezon?" he asked, his voice low. "No, sir. We were out of water, almost out of ammo. Everyone thought we were done for. But Joe, he found a way. He always did. Said there's always a third option between surrender and dying. It's called adapting." He leaned forward on the counter. "What's on your list, son?" I didn't tell him everything. I didn't have to. I told him we were living on some family property out in the woods, trying to get it fixed up. I told him we needed to lie low for a while due to some family trouble. He just nodded, accepting the vagueness. He understood the language of survival. From that day on, Mr. Henderson became our lifeline. I would email him a list, and he would box everything up. I'd drive to the store once a month, late in the day, and he'd have it all ready for me. He never asked too many questions. He'd just clap me on the shoulder and say, "Your grandfather would be proud of you, kid." He sold us seeds for a small, hidden garden we started, solar panels to supplement the generator, and books for Sam's schooling. He was our bridge to the world, a quiet, honorable man who, for the memory of an old friend, chose to help 2 desperate kids. Life fell into a new rhythm. Mornings were for schoolwork. Sam devoured books on physics and history while I studied for my GED online. Afternoons were for work, chopping wood, tending the garden, maintaining the bunker's systems. Evenings were for us. We'd read or play chess on a small board we found, or just talk. In the confines of that concrete room, buried under the earth, we became closer than ever. We weren't just brothers, we were a team. One evening, about a year after we'd found the bunker, my phone rang. I'd kept it charged, turning it on once a week to see if there were any messages, a painful ritual of hope and dread. It was my mother. I hadn't spoken to her since that first night. My hand hovered over the screen. "You should answer it," Sam said from his cot. "You need to." I took a breath and swiped to answer. "Hello? Leo?" Her voice was thin, watery. "Oh God, Leo, is it really you? Are you okay? Are you safe?" "We're safe," I said, my own voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Where are you? I've been so worried. Rick and we broke up. He's gone. You can come home now, honey. Please, just come home. Come home. The words sounded strange, foreign. The house with the cracked porch and the silent mother wasn't my home anymore. Home was a concrete room in the middle of the woods. Home was a place built with love and sacrifice. "We're not coming back," I said, the words costing me more than she would ever know. "We've got our own place now. We're doing okay." "What are you talking about? Leo, you're just a kid. You and Sam need to be here with me." "You made a choice a long time ago, Mom," I said, the ghost of my grandfather standing beside me. "You chose a lie because you thought it would keep us safe. I get it. I think I finally get it. But we're choosing something else now. We're choosing the truth, and we're choosing to be safe on our own." I could hear her sobbing on the other end of the line. A part of me, the little boy who just wanted his mom, wanted to break down, to tell her where we were, to go back. But the other part of me, the part that had read my grandfather's journal and counted his money and fixed his generator, knew that going back was impossible. You can't unlearn the truth. "I love you, Mom," I said, and this time the words were real. I did love her. I loved the broken, brave, scared woman who had done the best she could with the jagged pieces of her life. But we're okay. We're really okay. Goodbye. I hung up before she could reply. I turned off the phone and looked at Sam. He was watching me, his expression a mixture of pride and sadness. "Was that the right thing to do?" I asked him, my voice barely a whisper. "It was the only thing to do," he said with a wisdom far beyond his years. "Grandpa would have done the same thing." He was right. We stayed in the bunker for another 2 years. I got my GED. Sam, a budding genius, finished the entire high school curriculum on his own. We saved almost all of the money. We became self-sufficient, strong, and independent. We weren't hiding from the world anymore. We were preparing for it. On my 18th birthday, we walked out of the forest, not as victims, but as survivors. We used the money as a down payment on a small house, a legitimate one, above ground, with windows and a real mailing address. It was on the edge of Pine Ridge, not far from Mr. Henderson's store. I got a job with a local contractor, putting my grandfather's engineering mind to good use. Sam enrolled in community college at 14 and blew everyone away. We never told anyone the full story of the bunker. It was our secret, our sacred place. We still maintain it, keeping it stocked and ready. It's our family legacy. It's a monument to the man who built it, a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of love are the ones no one ever sees. It's not a place of fear anymore. It's a place of strength, a reminder that even when you're buried, you can still find the light. Looking back, I realized that my grandfather gave us more than just a shelter and some money. He gave us a choice. We could have taken the money and run, lost ourselves in the world. But by staying, by embracing his legacy, we found ourselves instead. We learned that home isn't a place you are given. It's a place you build. It's a foundation of safety, hard work, and love. Rick kicked 2 boys out of his house that day, but in doing so, he sent them toward the only real home they'd ever know. The story of what you inherit isn't always about money or property. Sometimes it's a story. Sometimes it's a burden. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it's a key to a lock you didn't even know was there. My inheritance was a concrete room in the woods, and it saved my life. It taught me that you have to build your own safety in this world, and that the best foundations are made of truth, no matter how deep you have to dig to find it. So I want to end by asking you something. What's the bunker you've had to build in your own life? It doesn't have to be a physical place. It can be a skill you learned, a community you found, or a truth you had to accept in order to survive. Share your story in the comments below. Reading them, seeing how all of you have built your own places of safety is what keeps this channel going. It reminds me, and everyone else here, that we are not alone in our struggles. Thank you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing. We're building our own community here, one story at a time.